I'm a bit of a stickler on this, so you take or leave my position. But movement is like usually the first thing. I usually work on technique. Never progress in load volume until that tech. So I call it like an 85% rule. If the technique is like what I would consider to be 85% acceptable or better, we're good to go. We are training.
Mm-hmm.
Once we drop below what I would call like an 85% quality mark, that's when we have to backtrack a little bit and say either we're reducing the load in terms of trying to improve technique, or we're going to backtrack a little bit for the next week and we're going to start at a lighter load and make sure that technique's crisp. But I usually don't like to find myself in that position because I like to make sure that technique is dialed in. And when I say technique, this is something kind of, I don't know, somewhat contentious, right? So the notion that there is no perfect technique for everybody is true, right? There are some external cues that we can all generally agree on, which would, cause us to say, like, this is a good looking high bar squat, this is a good looking bench press, this is a good looking deadlift, right? Most of it's around like posturing, basic movement of the joints, things like that. Within that, once that is locked down, and I know that I have an athlete and I say, you're going to go do deadlifts, and I don't have to worry about them doing a poop dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're good to go. Then within that, once they kind of get intermediate at that intermediate training stage, then we say, kind of individualize this technique a little bit to yourself. So I might ask you to start with your butt way down, almost like a squat kind of setup in a deadlift. And that's how I'm going to teach you how to do it. But then at some point, you might say, it's actually a little bit better. I get more out of this movement if I raise my butt up a little bit higher from the starting position that we have been training for a long time. Can I work on that a little bit? Yes, that's fine, as long as it's not breaking any of the major external constraints. So, we're talking about when do you decide movement training or periodization? Yeah, movement training always comes first. And in fact, and this is, again, take it or leave it, this is one of the reasons why I don't typically program a lot of the Olympic lifts or their variations, because the amount of movement training required to get somebody going on that is a lot. It's a big investment in terms of the tech requirements, and you could make a strong case in saying, like, can they get pretty much a similar stimulus from doing something like a jump or a loaded jump or like a jump shrug kind of thing? And the answer is yeah, probably, and that's a pretty quick and easy one to get going on. So there are athletes where I do work on those things, and usually I have the fortune of them have some experience in that beforehand, and then they can kind of just come into it. But if I get a new athlete, we might work on some like pulls from mid-thigh, kind of more or less like a, jump shrug from mid-thigh. And that might be like the only Olympic lift or variation on that we do for a long time, because you get the same benefit without all the movement investment in terms of practice, because it's like you have an opportunity cost, right? Am I training them to be a rugby player, or am I training them to be a fucking weightlifter? Like, do they need to be able to do a snatch? No, they need to be able to like ruck, maul, kick, catch balls, right? And they need to do it strong and powerfully. So can I get them to do like a jump shrug, get the same power output on those target muscles and get them going and good training right away? Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of have two perspectives on that, where like on some things I'll spend a lot of fucking time. We will drill squat technique till we can't do it anymore, right? But other things like Olympic lifts, like that's a big cost in my opinion, and that's something I wouldn't spend a lot of time, and I just probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I think it goes, especially with the Olympic lift. The reason you don't do it is because the movement isn't there, like, and it's a waste of time to try and get the movement there. It's not a waste of time to try and get someone to squat well. Like, that's a basic movement pattern that people need to get down. I do a lot of stuff where it's just basic jumping, and people, like, sometimes it seems so simplistic, but it's like no one trains this stuff at this basic level, and no one actually gets better at doing this stuff because they quickly add weight, and then they get better at pointless weighted jumps, or they get better at moving inefficiently with more load. And it's like, no, like, break this movement down, like, do every rep like it's a 1 rep max. But you're not being judged on how much weight you're lifting. You're being judged on how fucking perfect is that movement. Now, when you go back to doing the weights, you don't necessarily have to view it that way. You have to view it so that it is, so someone looking at it from 10 meters away can say, yeah, that's a squat, or that's a deadlift, and they know what it is, Whereas, if you're doing a shitting dog, it's a mistake.
Absolutely. And like, one of the things that kills me with sport training too is like, imagine the progress and momentum you carry if you dial in a technique, right, you got your athlete proficient, let's just use squat because that's a good example that we've been working with. You got somebody who's really good at squats. You can take them through their entire fucking preparatory period and into their sporting period where you say, okay, we're doing, we're starting our GPP stuff. We're doing squats at like 8-ish, plus or minus 8 reps for kind of work capacity hypertrophy. As we move down the line, now we're doing like 5 or 6. Now we're doing 3 to 4. Now we're doing 1 to 3. Like, you've been dialing in that technique for that amount of time under different loads. You're going to be strong as fuck, relatively speaking, by the time you get to that 1 to 3 stage, because you have been doing that same movement for so long. Is that necessarily the best way to grow muscle from a hypertrophy standpoint? No, but it's a really good way of movement training and getting strong as fuck in a certain movement, and that's going to have a lot of carryover in your sport practice. So there's kind of like a short-term versus long-term consideration there, where you might be like, okay, I do have an athlete that needs to gain a significant amount of muscle to become more competitive, and there's maybe some different strategies we use for this athlete. I have another athlete who is just doing kind of more vanilla training, and I'm going to keep that same movement in for as long as I can so that they make really tangible progress over the course of 6 months on this movement and get strong. And then after that one's kind of tapped out, maybe we do a new block at the end of the season. I might switch it out for like a front squat or something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so important that like you just move so much better, and I think that like it also stops you from getting people that squat once a year for 4 weeks. And then they complain that squatting hurts their knees every time they go back to it. It's like, well, yeah, you haven't got good at the fucking movement. Yeah, I mean, it's just obvious.